Hello, IG Live family, and welcome to the very first edition of All Good Reads. I'm so excited to start doing this, actually. It's the same kind of philosophy of All Good Things. This is content that will educate, inspire, and leave you fuller. But this is focusing on authors that are writing incredible pieces of work that teach us a lot about different kind of topics. And today I'm so very happy to welcome in Christina McClelland. She is the author of A Circle of Chalk. This is a beautifully written, as I said, complicated story about IVF and fertility. It's a deeply personal story for many people who've struggled with fertility issues because she tackles many of the things that you would expect infertility brings: anxiety, depression, confusion. And Christina, let me see if I can invite you in. If you see, there we go. Let's see here. There you go. I invited you in. So this is going to be showcasing different authors, kind of like a book club of sorts. And Christina is now live with me. Hello, sweet friend. How are you?
Hi. Here, I'm going to get scooted back a little bit so my face is not.
Your face is beautiful. It's looking perfect. I love all those books behind you. I was just explaining to everyone the idea of All Good Reads. This is the same content that inspires and educates and leaves you fuller. And I really wanted to bring you on to talk about A Circle of Chalk because this is such a special book. It's unique in a way that I haven't really experienced. It tackles such a complicated story. It is fiction, but as we'll get to a little bit later, it's turned into reality. So tell us a little bit about A Circle of Chalk.
Right. And I always like to kind of start with, we've done dozens of Zoom meetings this summer, well, since May, all over the country with groups of women. And I always start by saying, you know, when I started pitching this book several years ago, 3 years ago, I had several people in the industry say, oh, this is too science fiction for mainstream fiction, or oh, it was too science fiction. And but
too
the
impossible
reality
to
that
happen.
the reality that I knew at the time from interviewing doctors is that the technology existed, we just weren't using it clinically yet. And so to see last week the story come out about the Gibson baby being born after being frozen for 27 years is remarkable. And it's and I love it because that's basically the same amount of time that that happens in my book. And so it's nice just to kind of think, you know, it is possible. It's not science fiction. It's actually real. But that's what was fun about the research component to this. It's like every little thread that I would pull led to something else, and the history of IVF and assisted reproductive technologies was really interesting, and it was really a foot race between different countries in the same way that you think about space exploration or other things. They were all trying to be the first to have the first test tube baby.
And Christina knows a lot about this topic. If you have questions, she's researched it for years. If you have questions, chime in the comment section and I'll get them in. But this is fiction, as I said, and it follows two couples on their journey in so-called test tube baby. Tell us a little bit about the ups and downs that you focus on here. It's not just the technology. There's also a lot of the ethical questions that come up as well.
Absolutely. And so bioethicists were also on my list of people that I interviewed for the book. And it's also so interesting because, like a lot of medicine or scientific advancement, public perception changes over time. What is weird, or I mean, these are words that I did not come up with, that I heard from people that I interviewed that were going through IVF treatment in the 80s and 90s. Weird. What was the other, you know, even the word test tube baby, we don't use anymore because that had such a negative connotation in it. And what that did is it made, for those women that were wanting to use that form of fertility treatment, it made them kind of retreat to a closet of sorts and to keep all of that in. And so what that what that then means is what the book gets into is the mental health aspect of it that is so hidden. And what I want to bring out and that's the whole point of the book, is for us to start talking about it as women and as couples. It seems like most couples now going into IVF are both on board, and that's wonderful. But so many women that were early patients in the 80s and 90s were going it alone, and then not being able or feeling like they could tell. Even the Rioses that are real people in the book didn't tell anyone that they left Los Angeles and flew to Australia to try to have a baby, and they told no one. So I wanted to dip into the mental health part of it, and to bring up the conversation, and to bring up, because there are resources I have found, but there's also, most of the women I talk to aren't aware of those resources. So we need to make that bridge and that connection, so that people, that's the number one comment that I got again with these different Zoom talks, is during them and then afterwards, women would say, I thought I was the only one, or how did you know my story? How did you know how I felt? And it's because, not that each individual story is not important or impactful, but the reality is so many women are feeling that same heartbreak, and that same desire. And so they need to know that there's a community out there that can support them if they need that and if they want that.
Let's talk about that, because I personally have not experienced infertility, but I have been very close to family and friends who have lived it. Years and years of it, different stages of IVF, held their hand, not knowing what to say. Sometimes that's all you can do. The anxiety and depression associated with infertility is so very real. And it is absolutely more acceptable than it was in the 80s to pursue different scientific routes to becoming a parent. And it's not just acceptable, it's embraced, because so many people are going through it. It's still stages of grief. You know, you grieve the path to parenthood that you thought would be. You grieve in some cases, pregnancies that you'll never have because you have a surrogate. You grieve the process of just having it be easy. So what do you look at when you come to resources and how people can get some of the help through that?
So there's great so if you're a social media person, and so if people are watching this, then they probably are, there are great online communities. Fertility Rally is one that it enables. It's a lot of sharings, and again, people may or may not feel comfortable sharing as much as some people do, but I think it's wonderful when women can just say, this is what happened today. We went in, we thought, like you said, we were prepared for this, we got told this, and I'm devastated. And I think I learned this in therapy years ago, and it's so simple, but it's something that I think we need to be reminded of. It's okay to say, this stinks. Like, this isn't fair. It feels unfair. I've done everything. And for so many women too, the hard part, especially today's woman, we do everything we're supposed to do. We go to college, we want a career, we want all of these things. We have all of our ducks in a row. And then it's like, and in my case, I then decide that I'm ready to have a child. And then life can kind of hit you in the face, and you go, and you're thinking, wait, no, or that's how the experience that I had. And I did not end up going through IVF treatment, but I did have, where this kind of all started is I did have the experience of sitting in the doctor's office after a year of back and forth with my husband, if we were ready to be parents, if I was ready to be a mother because of my career. And then I'd finally come to this grand conclusion. And then to go in, and she came back in and said, it's not possible. And I remember being like, wait, what? But and and that's devastating. It's a loss. To your point from before, it's yet another loss that you didn't anticipate. And as a woman, you feel like that's part of what you're supposed to do in this world. But so the good news is, if that happens to you, there's so many ways now to have a baby and to grow your family. So many ways. And I mean, I didn't know much about embryo adoption until I started researching the book, and that's fascinating to me too. It's interesting in that there's not a lot of regulation around it, and it's a lot of self-reporting. So I interviewed different women and different clinicians across the country, and you can have vastly different experiences depending on where you go, meaning open adoption versus closed adoption. How much information do you get about the donor parents? And it comes into play later if you need medical records or something. That's when it starts getting complicated, and we, meaning the United States, is still working through some of those rules and laws. And right now there's just not many. So it's kind of one person called it a Wild West of legality where this is concerned. We've gotten surrogacy kind of pretty good, with contracts and that sort of thing. But that's another reason I wanted to take the book back to the 80s and 90s, even when there were no contracts. And I cannot imagine the feeling of getting divorced and having not your eggs, but your embryos go to someone else, not of your choice. That blew me away that happened over and over and over.
And I have done so much reporting on this that the Wild West analogy is what has been used to me so many times. So I've covered when embryos were mixed up and people
Yes.
who thought they were getting their babies. It was put into a different woman and they had their child. We've all covered the clinics across the country where there have been embryo losses because of they just haven't had great facilities. And it's just the regulation is not there as much, but the science and the possibilities are there. And I've had a good friend who I won't say what her name is, but she, in my business, that has talked about how she went through IVF. She has a number of embryos still frozen, and she's really struggling with what to do with them. For her, those are babies. And everybody has a different definition on the embryo, but for her, they're for babies. And the thought of letting them be discarded is unimaginable, but then the thought of giving them to somebody else and knowing that her children have siblings out there. How do you tackle that in the book? Because that's such a huge part of it.
And so it is fiction, but it's based on true stories. And some of the characters, for example, the Rios family and Alan Trounson, they are completely real. I didn't make up anything to do with them. Jenna and Mia and Ellie are a combination of stories. But where one of the opening scenes comes from when Jenna's in the facility, I don't want to give too much away about the book, but when it's something devastating is happening, she had named them. And that came from a client of mine years ago who came, and she, again, like a lot of us, focused on her career, got married in her 40s, had frozen eggs, then was ready to have children. And she came in to my office one day, and she was so excited. And she said, "I have 3 girls and a boy." And I said, "What?" And because this was 12 years ago. And she said, "I have, this is it, and these are the names." And my first thought was not judgment, but it was fear. I went inside because I thought, they're so real to her already, and rightfully so, because to your point, it's so individual how you feel about them. And so I took her, and then I started thinking, and if she got divorced and her ex-husband tried to take those babies, she would do everything in her power. And that's what I love, the Agatha Christie quote in the beginning, but that she wouldn't let it happen, and B, if it did happen, it wouldn't be pretty. And so I think that's where Jenna's character came from. Because I read through so many court cases where 90 to 95% of the time all frozen embryos were awarded to the man and were discarded, which is fine. That's our law. But the emotional toll that would take on a woman, especially if that was your last chance at having children of your own, biological children of your own, is something, again, I think it's something worth talking about instead of just having a black and white law. So
especially when, you know, there's such emotion attached to it, as you point out. And, you know, Christina, something that I didn't set up before all of this is your career before kids, what you did, and how that influenced the book as well.
So I've always been a writer. But as my mom told me when I got out of college, she said, you can't. She said, what do you want to do? And I said, oh, I'm going to be a writer. And she said, well, you can't do that.
That's what my dad said about TV.
Yes. So I did the next best thing, and I was in the art business. I was in finance for a little while, and then I was in the art business for over a decade, right here in Buckhead. And I was the director of a gallery, and I loved it. I loved working with living artists. Because I love the stories. And I think that's what was really appealing to me on a personal level. The stories of the artists themselves, but also the stories that the paintings brought, and then transferring those to another home. So it all, I don't know, it all kind of worked when this book came together much quicker than some of my others, because it was so interesting to me. And there was so much that I didn't know until I started, like I said, started following those threads. So it's just, and like I said in the beginning, there are 8 million, at this point, over 8 million babies in the world, or people in the world, born from IVF. So that's a lot of people that wouldn't be here if those doctors, those initial doctors and patients, had not gone through what they went through to make that possible. And I think so it's a tribute to those people as well.
And as you point out, you're a storyteller, whether that was in a gallery or whether that was as a writer. And I think that's what's really unique about this book, is it being a fiction, it being a story, it personalizes it in such a different way than I ever can. I've tried to cover fertility stories extensively on my show, just because I know how it touches people. And you talk about the numbers. Everybody knows somebody who's been affected by fertility, and they're always really emotional as well. What type of book is this? Because when I was reading reviews, which are rave reviews, it's the page turner type thing. It's the, you know, this is the thing that you're going to curl up to and you're not going to be able to stop. You just want to learn how they navigate this complicated world.
So I purposely wanted fiction from the get-go. As much research and medicine that went into it, I wanted it to be fiction because I wanted to get it to more people, and to have it just reach a broader base. And I also purposely condensed down the story to keep it moving quickly. I like books. I can love a big saga sometimes and really get into it, but I also love books that I can keep interest with and move through quickly. So it is a pretty quick read. And it also, I wanted to show, with Jenna in particular, she's going back to the mental health aspect, how, and this is, I've heard it over and over from women this year, you can have it all, and you've covered it in your show, on paper and on the outside. You can have everything together and you seemingly have everything. But if there is that one thing that you don't have, it can unravel you and get the best of you. And I wanted to show how sad and how scary and how quickly that can happen. I have so much empathy for Jenna. I rooted for her the whole time. But it's a hard road. It's a really hard road. And what's also really interesting, going back to the mental part too, is there was a doctor, Sophia Kliegman, in like the 1930s in New York, that was writing papers on psychology and pregnancy or conception, and the link between anxiety and basically the longer, I've heard this from other OBs too, that if you're not pregnant within 6 months, you're most likely not going to get pregnant in the 6 to 12 month period because of anxiety. And I think that that is so interesting and needs to be explored more, which I guess is where the acupuncture is kind of a new thing that people are doing, or meditation. There's a great woman in LA, Josephine Lurie, that's on Instagram, who's wonderful. And she does specific meditation exercises or lessons for fertility. And so I think that that is really great. And then surrogacy is a whole nother avenue that I'm glad is becoming more and more mainstream. Because we have a close family member that told me, which I loved, that they are going down this route right now. So they're smack in the middle of it. And she said, I was on the fence. And when I read A Circle of Chalk, she's like, I knew we had to do it. And I was like, oh, that makes me feel good.
So you're going to be the reason for a baby in the world. That's a good feeling.
I was going to say, so basically that baby can be attributed to me. No.
Yeah. Congratulations. You're the godmother.
Again, the point of writing the book was personal interest, to inform, to educate, start a conversation, and hopefully in touch one person emotionally and make them feel not alone and make them feel like you have options. Explore your options. Don't be embarrassed about those options. Don't have shame about infertility. It's that's what's really important to me about the book. And then hopefully the book is entertaining and fun to read and all of that too. But that was the main point of it all.
You know, my mom always says to me, and I thought about this when you said it looks like everyone can have it together, but one thing out of place and it can unravel you. My mom has always said to me, you know, life, and it sounds negative, but if you look at life in this way, you'll enjoy the good parts a lot more. Life is a series of losses. And so when it's good, just enjoy it, because something's going to happen. That's just the way life is, and it's okay. It's not, you know, anything that you should be afraid of. It's just really take advantage of it when something is good. And, you know, I think social media has done such a disservice to everyone when it comes to parenting. I think it's I started doing Instagram versus reality because so many people were saying to me, oh my gosh, you have it so put together. You're a working mom. You make it look so easy. And I was like, oh man, I am doing a big disservice to working mothers out there. I do not have it together. I also had a really rough road in early motherhood. It was a real challenge. I think that's not talked about a lot. And it's just, yeah, you post your picture of your newborn and you're like soaking up all the snuggles. And nobody is posting the picture of, you know, I don't know what to do. He won't stop crying. I haven't slept in 3 weeks. I am freaking out that I'm going to, you know, ruin this child's life. I mean, there's just so much that's not discussed, that these types of books are the conversation starter, so to speak. And that's really what it is that I wanted to do here on All Good Reads, is to really have a place where people can start a conversation about important topics. So Christina, where can people find your book, and where can they purchase this great read, since we all have time now at home?
So they could go to barnesandnoble.com. They can go to Amazon. On my website, ckmbooks.com, there's also a link, I think, to several different places where you can buy it. But those are probably the easiest, either Barnes & Noble or Amazon. But yeah, and I have one right here, so I'll show it to you.
And I love the cover. Isn't your sweet baby girl on the cover?
I was going to say, so this is Emily. I am friends with an amazingly talented photographer, Katie Oblinger, who's here in Atlanta. And she laughs at me because when we do family pictures, although this sounds like something you would be up for too, I let the girls pick out. They are now 10 and 6. At this point, they were 5 and 8, I guess, or 9, almost 9. And on this particular photo day, they wanted to wear their ballerina tutus. So I was like, great. So Katie came and took a bunch of pictures of them running in the yard. They had those baton things, you know, and she caught this really amazing photo where it was going straight across Emily's eyes. And then my publisher redid and added the second one. But this part is from that photo. And I just, as soon as I saw it, the fact that you could see her face but couldn't see her face, because I think that is how frozen embryos why we have a hard time as well. And so anyway, I'm so excited that Emily made it onto the cover.
Well, Katie is on watching. She says, love you. Katie, your beautiful photograph. And also make sure that you follow Christina right there at Christina McClelland Books on Instagram, because you can see all of her wonderful posts. She does a lot of different interviews, continuously researching this topic. You are such a gem. I actually thought back to a time that we had dinner years ago when I just said, hey, what's going on? You're like, I'm actually writing a book. And I was like, I wish I could get my life together. Where I could write a book.
It was at Local 3. Were we at Local 3?
It was at Local 3, and you were so nonchalant about it. You're like, oh, it's just a little side hobby. And now it is. Deanna, hi, it's good to see you on here as well. Deanna Thomas is on here saying hi. But it is just so amazing when I see strong, powerful women accomplishing such great things, especially when they're great role models for your two daughters also.
Oh, well, thank you. And we have the real life hot mess at home too. So.
Oh, we all do, dear. We all do. That's what joins us all together, and that's why we, have wine cocktails in the driveways.
Yes. Yes.
You take care. Thank you for being on.
Yeah. Thank you so much. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.